Hi, this is Mehdi,
Hey, this is Fran.
and this is Total Tactics Football. Today, we're going to talk about Chelsea's win over Brighton at the Amex Stadium. It was an interesting game, not the most convincing from Lampard's men, but they got the three important points. And on another day, Brighton could have done something else. So, Fran, how do you feel? What were the positives for you from this Chelsea side?
No, I agree with that. So I think Chelsea had a poor game, but everyone was anticipating the debuts of Havertz and Werner, the two German signings. And we do know that they're going to be superstars no matter what. I think Havertz had a more quiet game, but Werner actually looked very, very promising in the first half. He earned the first penalty of the game, and you can see his physicality will be a constant threat for defenders in much the same way that Rashford and Martial have been kind of plaguing the league with their speed and also their first touch. Just in terms of his ability to play off the back of the shoulders of defenders, I think he was constantly making runs and at times he was offside, which does suggest that he has a little bit of lack of synergy with the kind of Chelsea midfield. But he was constantly making those runs, and I think that sort of service will be built over time, and there will be players like Havertz, for example, or Mount, who can feed him the dead balls that he can play off of in the same way that he used to with Leipzig.
No, that's absolutely true. For me, I feel Kante had a really good second half. It took a little while to grow into the game, but in the second half, we could see the shades of old. The guy who was just basically covering every inch of the grass. He was passing, he was moving the ball, and I feel they were using his athleticism. Chelsea looked a lot more fluid in the final third. The players around him looked like they were a lot more comfortable because once you have that midfielder with this drive, pumps up the rest of the teammates. At the same time, you can say Brighton's players were a little deflated considering, they've already gone down 3-1. But I feel Kante, he's given really good signs. He looks like he's coming back from the injury a lot better. He's getting back to his old form. And those are just positive for Chelsea.
I agree. And I think, yeah, ultimately this game was masked the 3-1 result. There was a super strike from Reece James. And you have to give credit to that. I mean, those are the kind of individual moments and flair that a top team needs to kind of get away from the games that are getting tough. You can look at Liverpool last season. They were really scraping it through some games and as well as dominating some games. And not every game is going to be fantastic for Chelsea. You do have to look at the fact that they're missing a lot of key men. Ultimately, with the Reece James goal, Chelsea looked fantastic, perhaps on a highlight reel, but it does mask some of the, darker issues. And I think in this game, we saw Lewis Dunk had a fantastic opportunity to actually put Brighton ahead.
Yeah.
And that's where we kind of have to look at the bad for Chelsea.
No, definitely. I mean, I feel Alonso was the weak link. We know he's much better when he's playing with a three at the back. He's as a wing back, but at the left back, he can sort of not be the best defensive awareness at times. We saw Lamptey gave him some tough time today, but at the same time, you also got to take into account that Chilwell isn't here yet. They paid a lot of money for him, and who we know is going to be the starter for Lampard. So, I mean, considering all that, I think Alonso is good enough to deputize in his place. He has an abundance of experience. And considering, this is a long season to go, it's a place that definitely they will be improving on.
No, I agree. And I think you have to give credit to the performance of Lamptey from Brighton. And he's obviously a Chelsea youth as well who made a smart and wise decision, I would say, to move on from Chelsea because he has to deal with the competition of Azpilicueta and Reece James. And he looked fantastic today. In a sense, almost a Conte in the right wing back position, playing almost as a right mid at times. He was able to dispossess the ball all over the left side of the pitch. And for some reason, I think Chelsea seemed to kind of constantly play at the left side of the pitch. I think both Mount and Ruben Loftus-Cheek would drift into that sort of area of the field. But ultimately, Lamptey was able to boss most things and actually create a lot of chances for Brighton as a result. And it does go back to the fact that there was a lack of midfield structure. And I think stemming from that is the kind of double pivot of Jorginho and Kante. We all know that Kovacic is effectively, or was Chelsea's player of the season last year. And he's dearly missed. Not only does he provide these sort of defensive pressures for the team, he is key for ball progression. And in my opinion, when you have someone like Havertz, who's a star player, but more of a free roamer, he shouldn't be necessarily asked to drop so deep into the field. That's not exactly how he plays. I think Mount is a bit more flexible in that sense. He offers a lot more work rate in that sort of area in terms of recovering the ball and kind of re-energizing the play. Kovacic is duly needed so that Havertz can play in more advanced positions where he is able to kind of play off of his partner striker or other wingers. And I feel like Havertz needs to have a more advanced role in the team, whereas Chelsea are sort of waiting for Kovacic to come back into the ranks. Whereas when you see your Jorginho and Conte play together, sometimes I feel like there are gaps in the field that they don't really cover. While Conte is kind of picking up loose balls and going for recoveries on the sides, you have Jorginho who isn't able to exactly marshal the midfield by himself.
No, that's a very good point. I mean, this squad has a lot of players, and there's abundance in certain areas, and then they lack in others. What for you is the ideal system that Lampard should be deploying during the season? Do you feel like maybe, he needs to change a lot, or like they can probably establish one system that could get the best out of the players that they have at their disposal?
I think what's interesting about following Lampard, in a season derby in Chelsea is that he likes to really adapt his formations, and you can see he's a manager who really likes to adapt to the talent that he has at his disposal. I feel like sometimes he does end up playing formations, like, for example, the three at the back, which he went with at the late stages of the season last year. He kind of just goes for what he thinks will provide the best result. And today we can understand he played some sort of 4-2-2 formation. But as I mentioned, Ruben Loftus-Cheek and Mount were spending too much time on the left. And I feel like Chelsea's progression was entirely centered around that flank, which really made it so that Brighton had an easier day. Ultimately, when you're dealing with so many lethal kind of physical players, you want to be creating threats all over the pitch. And I think effectively they should be playing a 4-2-3-1 system. And with Ziyech fit at the end of the month, he should be able to slot in at the right wing position. We're not exactly sure about the timetable with Pulisic, but he is someone who is key for Chelsea because he is so direct. He needs to play at the left. Whereas Mount and Havertz, I think, are probably more suited to playing as a 10. Even though Mount has a lot of flexibility, I think he is still effectively better there in that position where he can feed balls into Werner, who can run in behind. And ultimately, you have Conte and Kovacic closing things out with a double pivot. And depending on, obviously, Chilwell's kind of recovery, you'll play with Chilwell, Reece James, and either Thiago Silva and Azpilicueta and Zuma.
I mean, it's going to be a long season. They're in a lot of competitions. They'll need all these guys. They need the depth. They need the experience. Some of these, I think, it's going to be very interesting to watch and follow for this season. So, stay tuned and have a good night.